Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. The trailer opens with some backstory, pretty much telling the story of the prequel
of Space Seed, right?
Yeah, right.
This is a movie that really kind of needs some setup.
Do you think?
Well, certainly for the trailer. I think it helps with the movie too. I know I had not seen Space Seed when I first saw this. I mean, at the young age of 10, I don't know if it really mattered. I think I kind of figured it out. I mean, I think you'll figure it out, but boy, after rewatching Space Seed and then this, I'm like, man, that really is a benefit having that story in my head.
Oh, it's a total package.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right once you do see it, but I don't think it suffers at all. I think once obviously talk about the film, but I think once you're into the narrative of the film, it moves pretty quickly and you get caught up pretty well. I don't know. I think it does a good job to set up the imagery that we're going to see. I find myself having seen the film thinking, well, that's kind of a waste of airtime.
It's one of those trailers from the early 80s that feels it's a dated trailer. Like the style is very dated. It's like, let's cut a few moments from this action scene and together with this action scene and just kind of, it just kind of gives you a bunch of action. But it's not where you're blending shots from all over the film. You're really taking a bunch of shots from one battle and kind of making a little kind of like a 30-second battle. And then you kind of cut to another one. And it just kind of moves like that. It's not not overly thrilling. I mean, I'm sure at the time it was effective enough. People, especially people who had seen Star Trek the motion picture and might have been a little put off by the pacing and maybe the lack of kind of adventure and the types of stories that they experienced on the TV show. This already seemed like, well, okay, we're tying it more directly to the TV show. We've got Khan from the TV show. There are battles. There's space action. There's multiple ships shooting at each other. There's real action now. And so I think for people who really wanted that aspect of the series to be brought to the silver screen, I think that the trailer was setting it up for them.
Well, and don't forget the massive fan service that is the best hero reveal of the Star Trek series. I mean, the backlit Kirk as the wall separates, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you don't know what the context is there, but we knew what Kirk looked like from the last movie, and he looks entirely different here. And we reveal the uniforms, we reveal the walk, we know who that silhouette is as he is intercut between other sequences of action, and that is a gift in this trailer if you are a fan, and certainly a dramatic way to introduce, the captain if you're not.
Another thing that I thought was interesting, there are rumors that a certain creator of the show had leaked the fact that Spock was going to die in this because he was a little miffed at having been kind of pushed out of it. And also of some of the angles that they were taking with the story, including the aspect that Spock was going to die. And so he kind of leaked it, and as fans were expected to do, they got rather riled up. The trailer is really light on Spock. Like, there's really not much other than some shots of him, but it's not a Spock-heavy trailer. It really focuses on the relationship between Kirk and Khan.
It really does, and that's where it should be. And I think that, back to the point about the backstory that we have over the blue wavy things in space, we actually have evidence that a trailer can be cut together without revealing who the nemesis is, because we did it with Khan, now 40 years later, right? The trailer that we're going to watch in the next
weeks.
con, or in a few weeks, the next con is just that, trying to hide the fact that it was Khan, and it still is an energetic trailer. So
sure,
I think for me the biggest lesson is I need more backlights
with smoke-filled rooms. I want, every time I walk into a room, I want to be backlit, and I want to have smoke just pumped everywhere.
Hallelujah.
Hear, hear.
Beyond the darkness, beyond the human evolution, is Khan, a genetically superior tyrant. Exiled to a barren planet, banished by a starship commander he is destined to destroy. Left for dead, he has survived.
I'll chase him round the moons of Nibia and round the Antares maelstrom and round perdition's flames before I give him up. There she is. There she is.
Shield's collapsing, Captain. Can you give me phaser power? A few shots, sir.
Not enough against their shields.
Scotty, I need warp speed in 3 minutes or we're all dead.
At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, the second in our Star Trek series with Nicholas Meyer's take on the crew of the Enterprise in 1982, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And want to join us for an episode? Support The Next Reel on Patreon to automatically be entered into our regular Listener's Choice drawings. Check us out over at patreon.com/thenextreel. And with that,
Roddenberry is out.
What?
Harve Bennett is in.
oh,
End of an era, Andy.
kind of crazy.
It was crazy, especially for the fans. I don't really remember it that much. All I remember is this was the pew pew shoot 'em up Star Trek that I started with.
Me too.
It's my second favorite Star Trek, and I love this Star Trek because it is so much the story of human issues, right? Of age and of deep friendship and of great loss and this sort of these human kind of practical issues that we deal with, these emotional issues that we deal with, and the fact that it's set in space, it ends up being largely gloss, like it could be anywhere, and I think that's a sign of just why it works as a great film, because it is a story that is particularly human, and it's portrayed well. That it's in space is just exciting.
Yeah, it really is, and it's there's just something very strong about the core characters in this particular story. I feel that the team behind this really tapped into the Kirk, Spock, McCoy trio and really just kind of hit it really strongly out of the park as far as how those three relate to each other and connect to each other and what they do well when they're working with each other and just kind of how their personalities are and everything. I think that those guys are just so great in this, particularly Kirk and Spock. Obviously, that becomes a very critical aspect of this. But I think there is a really strong relationship in that aging process that we get between Kirk and McCoy as they kind of have more of those conversations about it. I like the way that these elements are tapped into for this. And I think that there's another aspect of this story that I think is a very interesting one that I would have to really rack my brains to remember if it comes up much in other Star Trek episodes of the TV series or even into the films, but really the story of revenge. I mean, you've got such an interesting antagonist here with Khan Noonien Singh, who back from the Space Seed episode gets left by Kirk on SETI Alpha 5, and 20 years later, 15, however many years later, that he accidentally, Chekhov on a different ship accidentally kind of, saves him. And then he's fueled by this intense rage to bring down Kirk. And, it's one of those interesting stories where it's very much like this is an Ahab sort of story. He could very easily escape. He's got a ship, as his, as I don't know what you'd call that guy, his first mate kind of points out. He's like, we've got a ship, let's get out of here. And his response is, Kirk tasks me. He tasks me. And it's like he has nothing he can focus on other than the red rage he sees when he thinks about Kirk.
Which is so interesting, too. And you just watched Space Seed last week, right? You mentioned it.
Yep.
And I think the end of Space Seed is fascinating in the context of this film, because the end of Space Seed, nobody's really upset.
No, yeah.
Right? Everybody seems to get it. Khan, in fact, is really kind of looking forward to the opportunity of starting this civilization, right? So what he's mad about in this movie is not that Kirk put him on this planet. It's that Kirk didn't check in again, that Kirk left him there and never thought to go see how they were doing. And now that they survive, fueled by ego, look how grand it is that I get to reveal myself and show off that I have I've done all that I have done, even in this catastrophic circumstance that you set unto us. And I think that's really interesting, because the Space Seed does not end with the kind of rage that is fueled in the film, and yet the film is able to pull off that transition.
It is a pretty interesting ending of the show. And I when I watched, I'm like, gosh, they all seem kind of like friends at the end.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is great. We're going to go down and start our own colony on our planet. Even Spock is just like, it would be really interesting to come back one day, like in 100 years, and see what sort of growth what this seed has grown into.
Yeah.
And it's just very positive. And then it's like when you're in the film and you learn what happened to Khan and his people, about how, the SETI Alpha 6, can't remember what happened. It blew up and it threw off the balance of SETI Alpha 5, and it turned into just this nightmare wasteland of a planet to live on. I was like, that is a really kind of fascinating story. And yes, it was so funny when he's just like, you never checked on me.
Right? Like there was a responsibility, like we had a deal. Like when we smiled and nodded and you sent us down here, you were supposed to look after us, bud. And that never happened. And of course it never happened because it's Kirk. And Kirk at the time wasn't doing that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, he did his 5 years and then he went and got a desk job for a few years. So,
is this your favorite Trek?
It is. Although that being said, I'm excited to go through them all and see if that changes at all. I know yours is Nemesis.
Yeah, it is. I've decided that now whenever you bait me, I'll just say yes.
Yep.
Yep.
I
Nemesis,
love it. I'll say
love
something
Nemesis.
else every time then.
Oh, God, that Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy. Nothing like a bald Tom Hardy. This is a much more, it feels like a little bit like Red October.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nicholas Meyer really brought to the table kind of this nautical sensibility. You know, he said he was not a Star Trek person at all. And he's like, I don't know how to direct that. And then he was kind of reading it, and he said it reminded him a lot of the Horatio Hornblower novels that he read when he was young. And he understood those, and he understood kind of the seafaring ways. And he's like, it's kind of like that. And I think that it's a really interesting aspect that Star Trek films have taken maybe for a long time. I don't know if they're quite there still, but I feel like there was this nautical sensibility about all of the stuff going on here, especially toward the end as you get this essentially a submarine battle. But it was interesting watching it and just kind of comparing it to how Star Wars is so much about aerial stuff and fighting, and like George Lucas was always inspired by like the dogfights and all that sort of thing. And here you are with Nicholas Meyer taking the helm of this, and it does feel so much more like a captain at sea. And I thought that was a really interesting difference between these two franchises.
Yeah, I mean, the Star Trek comparison is always apt. They always have windows to look out of, right? Mm-hmm. And in this film, we have this example of, when the technology fails and you no longer have this giant view screen, what do you do? When you can't see outside this giant ship? It is a submarine battle. And I always find it funny that this, seasoned Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, has to be reminded that there is a Z-axis. You know what I mean?
Right.
Khan, he's quite intelligent, but he's thinking in 2 dimensions. And oh, by the way, so are you. Which is, I always think it's pretty funny.
One of the people was talking about how when they were designing the ship for this series, they were talking to somebody in the space program, and this person in the space program, I think this was actually when they were thinking about redesigning the ship for the first movie. And the person was just like, they were like, well, we need to make it look like the ships in Star Wars with all the little bits and pieces, and the ships are really bumpy because that helps with scale. So when you're working with models, you really get a better sense of scale. And the other person was just like, no, you really don't want to have your ship like that, because it's much safer to repair a ship from the inside than it is from the outside. So you want the outside of your ship to be really smooth, and all the access to the things that would need repair are on the inside of the ship. And so they decided to keep the Star Trek ships smooth on the outside. And I thought that was a really interesting difference between the two. Because
Everything comes down to Jeffries tubes. Jeffries tubes and panels, man. Everything.
Is that what it is?
That's right. This film also happens to be the source of a great many a nightmare. Yeah, it was tough. The SETI eel. It was a tough sequence.
I was afraid of earwigs for the longest time, because I was convinced. I think somebody actually told me that they did what these things do, where if you get them close to your ear, which is why they're called earwigs, by the way, because they will burrow into your brain and lay eggs. I believed that for a very long time.
God, I feel terrible for you, but I totally get it. Like, that's a very real fear and nasty. Yeah. Did it surprise you? I mean, as you think back to it, right? 1982. Good luck. But you think back to it, and you think back to the original motion picture and the original series. I mean, the original series, the effects were not all that adventurous, and lots of rubber suits and tribbles. But here we go. Here's a thing that actually goes into your brain, and they show it sneaking into the brain. Is that a surprise for a Star Trek film?
It certainly is a darker element, and I think it's something that it's not. I don't think it's too horrifying for a 10-year-old viewer to take. I mean, it did give me nightmares.
Let's just say it was. Maybe not.
But it wasn't the
10-year-old.
thing. It wasn't the thing. I mean, the thing was a much more horrifying sort of thing. This, I think, does have those elements, but at the same time, who am I kidding? It's pretty scary.
It's pretty scary. It's gross. It's really gross. It definitely stuck with me, and I think it became sort of the pin that kind of keeps this movie in the back of my mind. That particular one. It's a fascinating film. It really is. You want to talk a little bit more about the backstory and the eugenics war? Is that an important thing for you?
Well, I just think it's really interesting that Khan, his backstory from the space seed. He's a genetically modified being from Earth in the 90s. And there was this period, apparently, we must have forgotten about it, but, in the 90s that we were developing these genetically modified beings. They got so smart and intelligent and strong that they took over the planet, and Khan was one of them, and he ruled a great number of lands before they all fought. And then it sounds like he and his group, after they defeated the planet, they hopped into the Botany Bay and they took off, and then they were in space sleep, just like Ripley, for like 200 some years, and before Kirk found them and rescued them. But I just thought that was a really interesting backstory, that it ties to like our time, but I mean, back in the 60s, I'm sure they thought, oh yeah, 30 years from now, we were probably going to be designing genetically modified people.
It's Uber's next product.
Well, I guess you could say that we have Lance Armstrong. He's almost there, right?
Yeah, right. That's right. That was. You know what? They're gonna remake this movie one day, line for line, and just Lance cast Armstrong. Lance Armstrong, who will still be alive.
That's right.
Roddenberry was pushed out. Last movie didn't go all that well, and he became an executive consultant on this film.
Yeah, and this was, he had written a sequel where they, again, go back in time to save JFK, I think. But, I guess they're just like, you know what?
No one wants to make that movie.
Well, and I think he was kind of a pushy guy, wasn't he? I mean, with all the rewrites that he demanded on the first movie, and it didn't do as well as they wanted to, even though it made a ton of money. I don't know why people said, "Oh, it performed so poorly," but
I don't get that either. And in hindsight, as good as we thought the film was last week, it really surprises me that he wasn't given more sort of credit on this film.
Yeah, right.
But it is interesting. It was handed over to Harve Bennett this Jack Sowards. I don't know about this Jack Sowards. He doesn't have a lot going on in terms of his credit, but he does have a story credit on this, or the screenwriting credit on this film. What do you know? Do you know about this guy?
I don't.
This is a name that just sort of floated by on the credits. What I know is that there were a number of people who had their hands in the script, and this has been written. 5 different drafts had been written, and at one point they were really struggling for somebody to direct it, and they called in Nicholas Meyer, who hadn't done much at the time. Certainly no spacey stuff.
Well, I mean, Jack Sowards was one of those guys who, he was kind of a writer who was in the world of TV long before this, like in the 70s into the 80s through the 90s. But it's just one of those guys who kind of wrote little things here and there. But, he wrote a few episodes of Star Trek, I think. But I don't know. It's just one of those weird names to pop in. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, Nick Meyer was a writer. I mean, a writer-director. He directed one film before this. It made me wonder why they didn't.
We have to say what that film is, because it's it's easily in my top 50.
Is it really? I've never seen it. What's it? The Time After Time? Time
After Time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never seen it.
Yes, with Malcolm McDowell, Mary Steenburgen. Yes, absolutely. It's the H.G. Wells Jack the Ripper. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure and I'm just blind to it, but I do really like that film quite a bit. And then this, and he was so Bennett brought him over and said, let's talk about it. The way Bennett and Meyer talk about this experience, that they all met, that he handed over all 5 drafts. Meyer read all 5 drafts and then called Bennett over to his house and said, let's talk about this. they're sitting there talking at the house, and Bennett says, I hope we can come to a solution, because if I don't have a script in 12 days, ILM is not going to be able to guarantee effects for the film when we open. And Meyer said, wait a minute, you already have the film scheduled? Like, theaters are booking the film? Oh, yes, they are, and we're going to need the script. And so Meyer sat down, and impressing everyone, even Shatner, even Nimoy, who didn't want to be in the film at all, and turned out a draft in 12 days that everybody was largely on board with. And that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's really impressive.
Bennett had said earlier that he said, after he sat down over 3 months and watched all of the Trek that he could get his hands on, and he said Space Seed was the one that haunted me. He said, I knew that was the story that we were going to need to complete. Interesting, speaking of costs, because, you're right. They talk about how they needed to save money on this film because they were just taking a shot. It was a gamble, which is a ridiculous thing in hindsight. But they put this in the Paramount TV division instead of the film division, even knowing it was always going to be a feature film. But they put it in the TV division because they felt the TV folks could do it more cheaply.
Well, and you hear them talking about it, and the set designers, like the people in the art department, were just like, "Oh yeah, we were just walking around the studio picking things out of people's dumpsters because everyone else who, when they finish something, they just chuck it all." And we were like, "Hey, let's take this and make a mold out of this, and we can turn it into this wall, and we'll put something on the back, and then it's the other wall." I'm like, God, these guys were. This is like when I'm working on projects.
That's aspirational filmmaking, Andy.
It's very funny. Very funny.
This film is also noted as the first complete CGI sequence. That's what they keep telling themselves how great it is. This is obviously the Genesis sequence.
Yes, it was ILM.
Yeah, playing
around with the CGI.
And
although I have to say, I have to look this up now because Disney's The Black Cauldron, which is a terrible film. Oh, no, that was 85. That was a few years later. That also had some CG with the cauldron, but never mind.
Well, and I don't remember when we actually talked about this, but we did talk about the fact that the team and the guy who wrote the algorithm for the Genesis effect is still a leader in particle effects and works at Pixar, and in fact has done did all the Nemo water, and so any of the big particle effects from all the Nemo films, and I think we talked about it relating to Nemo and the octopus and the tank. There was something about that in a show we did when the Finding Dory came out. About that, because Pixar released one of their particle effects classes on Khan Academy. Khan Academy! Look at that. We bring it all the way back around. On Khan Academy, you can still go take it, and this guy actually is introduced, the guy who did the Genesis effect on this movie. I think that's funny.
It's almost like he is the genesis of all of this work, right?
He is. That's where it's him. Yeah, we're going to let that hang. So anyhow, this is the one big change that happened after the film was shot on test audiences, and that has to do with the ending.
Yeah, really interesting, which is funny because this was a secret that had been out for a while. Like I said, Roddenberry kind of was miffed, and he kind of spoiled it. Theoretically, it was him that Spock was going to die at the end of this, and it made people so mad. And then when test audiences saw it, they seemed kind of down. He said when the movie ended, everybody just kind of quietly got up and walked out of the theater. He said it was like a funeral, which it was. It was just a funeral for Spock at the end of the movie. But apparently people just didn't have any joy in their hearts. And so they did this reshoot, much to the chagrin of Meyer, who really was so adamantly opposed to doing it that he refused to actually have any part of any of the reshoots for any of the additional footage of the end when we see Spock's proton cannon coffin lying on planet Genesis. He said, I am not, why would I be a part of we just killed him. It's just cheating, and I don't want to be a part of that. And he also refused to be part of Star Trek II because of that, which is, I think, very funny, admirable in its own way, maybe.
It's interesting. A few the rumor that it was Roddenberry was confirmed, and it was confirmed by his assistant because she got in even more trouble by it. The same day that he leaked it, she went to a conference, to a fan conference, knowing that he had already leaked it earlier into the media, which hadn't been able to actually print anything, and she said it on stage in front of a bunch of people. And then everybody went crazy. And so she said it was definitely him, but it could have been me. But anyway, we were of a team, and it was definitely, he was outwardly upset about this whole thing. But what was more interesting about that last scene is that the way Bennett talks about it is that he said he went to Nimoy as on the day they were shooting, and he said, what can we do to leave the door open for a future? Right, or what can we do to establish a future here? And Nimoy knew what he meant. Like, what are we gonna do if we're gonna do another movie after this? And he said, I think I have it. I think I have it. We don't have to think too hard about it. What if we just roll the camera? I'm gonna get down in front of DeForest, and I'm gonna do a mind meld with him and just say, remember. And that's going to be the anchor. And Bennett says that was exactly what we needed. I didn't know how we were going to do it. I didn't know what the future was going to be, if there was going to be some other Spock consciousness in a different actor's body, whatever it was, but at least we had an anchor. And then you cut to Kirk, and the interview with Kirk is, I don't know if I can take it seriously, because he appears to be downright angry, saying that Nimoy and Bennett were in collusion. They knew the whole time, and they didn't want to tell me, and they just wanted me out of it, and that Spock was going to come back, and they just wanted to keep it a great big secret between the two of them. I don't know what to make of that.
I think that was very funny.
I think it's very funny too. And Bennett, when he talks about it, he says, I watched that scene and I watched people stand up and with tears in their eyes and applause in their hands, and I knew we had done the right thing. And he just almost can't keep his composure. Even it was at the time of the interview I was watching 20 years later, and he still tears up at the idea of Spock's funeral, which is an amazing sequence.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, one last little effects note before we move on. So ILM, I thought it was interesting that they were keeping very busy around this period of time. They were doing this right after Empire Strikes Back, which was a big project for them. And apparently they had 3 big films coming in right after Empire. And so ILM actually had to split their team into 3 to handle Poltergeist, E.T., and this. They were all getting their effects done at the same time, which was quite interesting. Just imagining like these amazing films all getting put together in rooms next door to each other. Yeah, pretty wild.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's do the deep scene dive, Andy. Oh, I need a submarine sound effect.
You do, yes.
The deep scene dive. This is, we're going to dive into a scene that we think actually is a great representation of the film and portrayal of the characters and camera and all the great stuff about it. This one is, we're interior in the rocky cavern that is Regula, the planetoid Regula. Kirk, Bones, Savick, and Terrell and Chekhov follow the crew of the abandoned Regula 1 into the core of this Regula planetoid. David jumps them. Kirk has some emotions. Terrell and Chekhov have their SETI worm adventure. And Kirk and Khan have their first really great monologue off. Now, I was an advocate for this film, or for this scene in particular.
Yes.
And because I really like it. If you look at it with your eyes crossed, it can be a touch soap operatic, right? Well, because it is the emotional pivots come hard and fast.
That's something that, Nicholas Meyer has talked about, how he is a huge fan of opera, and opera has these just big emotions. And so that's all through the film. I think that is a very just kind of a critical element of this story and how he chose to tell it, because I think you'll find that in a lot of scenes.
This one for me is great because it allows us to complete in our minds a number of character arcs. Or fill in some blanks that end up being important. First, we get David jumping Kirk from behind, and they're they don't know of their relationship. They don't know who each other is at this point. They have a fist fight, and it's a bit of a slow fist fight, right? It's a long, lingering, a series of 3 long, lingering shots with fists, kind of in the air.
Well, and David's got a knife. He does
have a knife. That's
slashing.
right.
It's more of a slashing and protecting yourself sort of fight.
Yes, / Fight Club, right? And and then we have this immediate pivot to where's Dr. Marcus? I'm Dr. Marcus. Kirk realizes, oh my God, I get this is the first thing I have to deal with. This is my son. And then he sees Carol, and he hasn't seen her clearly in a while, but he has to normalize his worldview now that his son is this doctor who just tried to knife him. But he's also having the emotional sort of experience of seeing her again. And immediately he turns around and sees that, Terrell and Chekhov are betraying them. And they have phasers raised. And that happens so quickly in this sequence that I find myself just riveted by him pinballing across this hall, this passage in this cavern, and being able to deliver all of the emotional resonance of each of these 3 discrete transitions.
Where's Dr. Marcus?
I'm Dr. Marcus.
Jim!
Is that David?
Mother, he killed everybody we left behind.
Well, of course he didn't. David, you're just making this harder.
I'm afraid it's even harder than you think, Doctor. Please, don't move.
Chekhov. I'm sorry.
Your Excellency, have you been listening?
I have indeed, Captain. You have done well.
Each of the character moments, like each of the little relationship scenes that you have here, we're not getting cheated out of any time spent in them. We're getting enough time in each of them to kind of get the emotional pivot points that we go through before it kind of pivots again over to the next pivot point that we have to go through. And it moves very quickly, but the characters are honest, and they hit all of those points, and it works, and it makes great sense. And because of the pace of it, it just keeps things moving so effectively and quickly. It's really an effective scene that really builds to a great moment between Khan and Kirk as we have Terrell dead, Chekhov unconscious, one of the Marcus's teammates dead, the Genesis gone. You've got this great kind of closing monologue that Khan gives Kirk, which is it's just a great kick in the teeth, and then of course ending with that fantastic scream that only Shatner could scream that way and echo across the planetoid as well as he does.
The Kirk transition in the second half of this scene, as soon as Khan is back on the radio, right?
Yeah.
And first of all, we should point out that there is some incredibly good tension in this sequence and in all the sequences between Kirk and Khan, and yet they never did a scene together, right? It's all over speakerphone or Skype.
Which is funny, just as a side note, it was pointed out late in the process of this whole production, that was pointed out to Nicholas Meyer, and because I guess the execs were nervous that we don't have our people meeting, and he's just like, well, I guess I never thought about it. It's just like, but you don't need it, and I think they realized we don't need to have them physically in the same room together, because the conversations they're going to have are going to be strong enough to carry it without them being in the same room.
The pivot that Kirk takes, we get to see some things from his character that we haven't seen before, and that is really why I love this sequence for him as a character moment.
Con, you bloodsucker. You're gonna have to do your own dirty work now. Do you hear me? Do you?
Kirk, you're still alive, my old friend.
Still, old friend. You managed to kill just about everyone else, but like a poor marksman, you keep missing the target.
When he says, still old friend, and Khan takes Genesis, you get to feel Kirk lose it for a little bit. You get to feel Kirk lose it because he doesn't know what to do next. He doesn't know in that moment exactly how this is going to play out. And he is a character who always knows how it's going to play out. I mean, we had just seen in the Khan introduction, the Khan reveal, we have that fantastic submarine sequence where, he knows already the codes to take the Reliance shields down. And he's totally in control, and he has that wry smile. And here, Khan, you'll have to come down here to do it. You'll have to come down here. I find that is some of the best Shatner work, certainly in the film, maybe in the series, until we get to my favorite film.
Khan, you've got Genesis.
But you don't have me. You are going to kill me, Khan. You're going to have to come down here. You're going to have to come down here.
I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you. I shall leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity in the center of a dead planet. Buried alive, buried alive. Come! Come!
Well, it works really well as really solid cat and mouse, and it's interesting because Khan always has kind of seemed like he's in charge, but he still gets really upset at Kirk when Kirk does things, and still manages to kind of dig him, like when he gets the codes for the Reliant and takes their shields down and blasts them and everything. Those are great moments. You get Khan getting really frustrated by Kirk. And this is that moment where it's almost like Khan has finally is finally willing to kind of take a breather, and he's just like, no, you know what? I'm just going to leave you there, and that's that. And he kills his radio, and that's that. And it's like, has he finally learned his lesson? Earlier he's just like, he tasks me, I must destroy him. And then this is that moment where he's finally past it. And theoretically, they might actually get out. So it is a really great pivot, if not for the surprise that Kirk has up his sleeve, as we find out later.
Right. Which is unclear at this point, when he's kind of lost control over the emotional exuberance of Khan, whether or not he had this in mind, right? The whole hours, not days thing. At least it was unclear to me. Whether or not he had this already kind of in the front of his mind, that this is how he's going to be able to get out of this,
right?
While he's screaming. The final scene, just in terms of an edit note on the script, Kirk yells, he says, "I'm going to leave you marooned for eternity in the center of a dead planet, buried alive." And that repeats, right? Buried alive. And cut to Kirk, and we've been moving in so slowly on Kirk's face, and he screams, "Khan, Khan!" He does that great shriek. As it was written in at least the script I'm looking at, Khan has one more line: "Goodbye, Admiral O, and don't count on Enterprise. She can't move. My next act will be to blow her out of the heavens." And Kirk screams, "Khan!" again. I'm so glad they cut that. That's like Columbo. Oh, and one more thing, and I'm really glad that they cut that line. I think it ends just perfectly, hearing Khan echoing through the moon.
Yeah, it's a beautiful end. And then you just, you end, you cut to the moon, and then you just have that last lingering shot on Khan as he just kind of sits there, just, happy that he's won. It's a great setup. A lot of great shots all through this. The Gain Rescher is the DP on this, and the camera work is pretty solid. I think one thing that Nicholas Meyer uses effectively throughout is moving the camera in small ways. Nothing too big. But you will get throughout this scene, it's mostly static shots, but every now and then, as a character moves, the camera will truck with them backward or forward, kind of keeping them in the same position as the camera moves. And then we'll get some tilts up and downs as people move, but it's generally stable. other than those few moments that I think really highlights some great tension, especially toward the end, as you get really nice slow. You already mentioned it with Kirk at the end, how you kind of get that slow push in on his face. You also get the same thing with Khan toward the end there, as you kind of just this nice push in on him as he as Kirk taunts him, and then he decides that he's just going to take the Genesis. So just some really, really, I guess it's pretty clean, pretty standard camera work, but it's effective. It's effective and it tells the story well.
It's not distracting.
No.
And that's, I think that's a good thing. There are some that surprise me that I feel like they could, this sort of standard approach, the safe approach, sort of misses opportunities for greater intensity, right? Terrell, when he pulls the phaser, we start with a close-up on his face and we have a tilt down to reveal the phaser in his hand, and that feels like a safe kind of, maybe early Hitchcockian reveal. They could have done more. We had more adventurous camera work in the motion picture. Same thing when Terrell kills himself. Chekhov is standing up and Terrell is on the ground, and he kills himself in a wide two-shot, and that seems like such a strange broadcasty style of a very tense moment that I wasn't crazy about. It ends up looking a little bit silly.
Well, it's interesting because if I recall, that's essentially the exact same setup that they used when Terrell first pulls out the phaser, and after David goes to attack and Savick throws him to the ground, and Terrell's phaser goes off. It blasts essentially the red shirt.
The red shirt, yeah.
Right, the one random guy in the scene.
Yeah.
It blasts him, and he disappears. So I wonder if ILM just said, okay, we're going to have two people get disintegrated by phaser shots. Let's just lock it off in this frame, and then we'll just be able to pinpoint them and pull them out.
Yeah, that's interesting. And speaking of very sort of pragmatic effect shots, the zoom into Chekhov's ear model as the bug crawls out, that was pretty effective.
I love it.
Gross.
Yeah. Well, they used it. It's essentially a crash zoom, right? It zooms so fast that you almost
can't
don't even
see the cut.
Exactly.
Right.
You don't realize that you're all of a sudden looking at a model, and it's just this giant ear model with that fantastically horrible SETI eel crawling out, covered in, I guess it was raspberry jelly.
Isn't it interesting? And this I file this under the minutia of things to get upset about that don't seem to bother all that many people. But here we go. The entire mantra of Star Trek is to seek out new life forms and new civilizations. And the first thing they do when they see this thing crawl out of Chekhov's ear alive, this alien life form that they've been ostensibly seeking out, is to shoot it and disappear it. Oh, wait, it's the only one never mind.
Yeah, I didn't hear the phaser set to stun before they did that.
No, I did not hear that. So anyhow, a note on lighting. I thought the lighting on that, on Khan in particular, is really nice, and it's interesting because it's blue and green, right? It's a really sort of cool tone, and it's not particularly villainous in this sequence, and yet the crew of the Enterprise are inside Regula, which is a predominantly brown and red, arguably villainous tones. I don't know if they're making anything of that, but I find it really interesting setup.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting, just the different color tones that they have going for them. Huh, I don't know.
The blue-green looks really good on his hair, on Khan's hair, too.
Yes, it does.
As long as you have those white
that
locks.
Fantastic Mad Max hair.
Totally.
It's like, did they get the wigs flown in from Australia?
Well, and thank God Robert Fletcher updated the costumes.
Oh, yes.
The uniforms are great and ended up inspiring, many, many more evolutions of this particular costume. It does, and I think another anchor in this scene, it does point out the Roddenberry departure. Roddenberry hated obvious rank insignia. He hated the overly sort of militarization of Starfleet, right? That wasn't the point of Starfleet. It was exploratory. This was, this whole guns and military and rank, that was really frustrating to him. And yet here we are in this scene that is so obviously the public servant science division versus the military of Starfleet. There is, I think, in this scene probably no more unsubtle thumb in the eye to Roddenberry, than we have right here.
It's so funny because I find myself really upset when I am in love with a franchise and somebody who comes in to work in that franchise who changes it up because they just want to try something different. And it really bothers me. I really am mad at them and I hate them for it. And, and it's one of those weird things where I think that in this particular case that the people involved made all the right decisions, because I also really just love these new costumes, and it really kind of shifted a direction for the whole franchise in all of its platforms, because they really kind of took to it everywhere. And I think it's a great modification to have made, despite the fact that it did not fit with Roddenberry's original vision. So I find it so interesting that I can be bothered so much when it's not something that I like, though,
Oh, totally.
I mean, and speaking of things like that, James Horner, he came in and didn't do any connection musically with Alexander Courage and any of his themes, or Jerry Goldsmith and any of his themes. But man, this is I think one of the iconic Star Trek scores. It's just so beautiful. It's one of, I think, James Horner's best scores. I mean, it's just a stunning soundtrack to listen to, amazing horn work, amazing just the way that he kind of develops the music that does feel very seafaring. I really, really enjoy it. And the music that he plays in this scene, it's not like the big themes, but it's got a lot of tension in it.
Well, there are, and the way Horner talks about it, there are 2 or 3 themes that he says, I feel like anything more than that, and people can't keep track of them. So really, we just want to create these motifs and just use them in all kinds of different ways, but that are fairly obvious, so you can really connect, what these things, what these things mean. And we had 8 French horns playing that loud burst of Khan, right? That's the Khan motif. It's not even a theme, he says. It's just this motif that we play over and over. But when we do that next to Kirk's Enterprise theme, which is a much more lyrical, melodic piece, it becomes a musical conversation that's happening every time we cut between the Reliant and the Enterprise in their duels across space, and it was super intentional. I love that idea of a musical conversation between these characters, not just blaring one giant piece of music, but something that really works well. I think this is just a great example of that. But I do want to remind you, go listen to the closing music of this score, and you'll hear every one of those themes, right? All the way. I mean, it's all woven right in after Amazing Grace. During the funeral, you get all of the history of Star Trek music.
Sure, and I guess end credits. That's always its own thing. I guess I meant in context of the actual film, but I mean that's kind of like what Michael Giacchino does. Also, when we get to him, he doesn't do anything with any of the original stuff except he'll throw it in at the end credits.
Well, yeah, in this case, it's a little bit of a crossover because it's not quite the end credits yet. He needed some sort of musical cue to get us into Spock doing the space Final Frontier thing.
It's the prologue now / epilogue.
Right, and it is really it is beautiful before the and the main credits start.
Right.
So I really, back to this, to the scene in particular, that we've got 2 little bursts of music led by horns. First, when Terrell and Chekhov turn on the crew, and second, and then it goes to silence, and then second, when Khan begins his final speech. And the generally large sort of void of music, it makes this sequence really haunting when it does come in, and you hear that buried alive. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, great sound work with the echoing voices and everything, and the echoing of the SETI eel screams when they come in and everything.
Oh God!
I will say there's one moment in this sequence that, or the scene that we ended up picking, that I do roll my eyes at a bit, and it speaks to what we've talked about a number of times when we go to like Steven Spielberg's films or things like that, where the world of the film only exists within the frame. Anything outside of that frame is not actually there. And this is like, David's jump scare when, we just cut from Kirk and McCoy looking at the Genesis on that side of the room. And then we cut to the other side as Kirk is walking back to the other group. And just out of frame, David comes flying in and attacks him. And it's just like, where was he? Was he like sitting on top of the Genesis device? Was he in the case? Like he would have been in the frame. It's so is obviously, just a poor example of a jump scare. But that's that type of filmmaking where it's like the world doesn't exist if it's not inside this frame.
We first started talking about this on December 2nd, 2011.
Was that our
that was
Last
where we
Crusade?
No, it was the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and that's when we first got really upset about it. We also coined the Spielberg spank. That's another one that you'll find in the glossary. Yeah, Dior de la Seine.
I thought it was the when we were talking about the X marks the spot scene in Last Crusade. Or no, it was
talk about that.
It was at the beginning of Crystal Skull when he's in the trunk or something, but
right.
We don't see. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Both of them. There's a close up on what's her name. Anyway,
Yep.
Yes, it's ridiculous, and it happens all the time, and it definitely happens here with poor David getting made to look like a doofus. Anything else you want to talk about here?
I think we have dived deeply, and
the scene has been doven. Any other cast or crew highlights? We've talked about Harve and Nick Meyer, and anybody else that jumps out at you that you want to?
I feel like, we're kind of not touching on everybody. We're trying to lighten that a little bit, but we should at least, Shatner, Nimoy, Kelly, James Doohan, Koenig. Is it Koenig? Koenig?
I've always
Takei. Well, I've got a friend with that last name, and it's pronounced King. So it's like it's one of those weird last names.
Oh,
I know. But Takei, Nichols, it's like that fantastic group of people that just really kind of make the core team. They're just all wonderful, and I just love them in the films, doing everything that they do.
And we haven't once yet said the words Kobayashi Maru.
We haven't said Kobayashi Maru or Kirstie Alley or Ricardo Montalban. We haven't actually said Ricardo Montalban.
I do have one thing to say specifically about Ricardo Montalban. Yes, that is his chest.
Yeah, apparently that is the question that Nicholas Meyer's asked more than anything else, which I don't know if I believe. I think he perpetuates that myth just so he can talk about Montalban's chest more often.
You know who tells stories like that? Guys who are jealous of Ricardo Montalban's chest.
Yes.
Like me.
Apparently so.
Look how quickly I like to bring that up. Yes. It is. It is a fantastic casting. We haven't talked about the one big thing, and this was the scene that you actually wanted to talk about, which is the actual talking through the glass sequence, the death of Spock, and just how important that sequence is in terms of, again, the character arc. And how well Nimoy pulls that off.
It's just beautiful, and it's funny because you hear there's the film, and you get so much emotion out of the film, and then you read the stories, and it's like sometimes the stories just really take so much out of the moments of the film, because it's like Nimoy didn't really want to be in the movie, and they had to twist his arm and said, "Hey, what if we give you a really good death scene?" He's like, "Oh, maybe I'm interested. Let me know more." And it's like this is how these backroom deals work, and it's like I don't want to know that. I just want to know that it was just written because it was a perfect way to tell this story.
Probably hosting the wrong podcast.
I know. Who needs all this extra behind the scenes info about these movies?
The thing that I like so much about that sequence in particular, the Nimoy sequence, and the way, and I don't know, I love that that they came back and did the reshoot. I love that there's the door that's open for the next movie, and I'm very attached to that. But I love what Meyer was trying to do. And when he tells this story of the day they shot that he's watching Leonard do his thing, and he's watching Shatner, and then he looks around, and everybody on the crew is in tears as they're shooting the scene. And he says, why is everybody crying? It amazes me that a guy who is that disconnected from the actual heart of the franchise can turn out something that ends up being a favorite of so many diehards of the same franchise.
Yeah, when you listen to him talk, he just sounds so disconnected from it all. And, it's just, and I don't want to say dismissive because he doesn't seem quite dismissive, but he's really close.
He's pretty close. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I mean, and I get his point. He's just like, I don't get the privilege to have those emotions when I'm the artist. It's and a little arrogant too. I don't get to have those emotions because I am the artist who has to make those emotions happen for everybody else. It's
for crying out loud.
I mean,
that is the most head-slappingly, like egomaniacal thing to say.
Those aren't his exact words, but I'm paraphrasing what essentially he was saying. It's pretty funny.
This film didn't do well in the big awards.
Not in what you would call like the Oscars or the...
what you might call the, quote, Oscars.
Those big awards. But it at least found its audience. This is a film that at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror films, it did win the Saturn Award for Best Actor, William Shatner, Best Director, Nicholas Meyer, and then many years later, in 2010, it actually won as a part of the Best DVD Collection, the Saturn Award for that. Then it also was nominated for Best Science Fiction Film, Best Supporting Actor for Walter Koenig, Best Supporting Actress, Kirstie Alley, Best Writing, Jack B. Sowards, Best Costumes, Robert Fletcher, and Best Makeup, Werner Kepler and James Lee McCoy. It only won, like I said, Best Actor and Best Director. I was surprised that Best Supporting Actor Leonard Nimoy wasn't up there, but apparently not. Apparently he wasn't good enough. So, but E.T. was the one who I believe took most of the big awards away from it. So, which I guess I can understand.
Yeah,
but it was a big this was the 5 nominees for Best Science Fiction Film: E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Blade Runner, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, Tron. Maybe not a great film, but really interesting. And then a film I've never heard of, Endangered Species, which I'm like, what is that film?
Wow.
You ever heard of that one?
No, I've never heard of it.
It's an Alan Rudolph film, which,
what?
Yeah, I know. It's about a retired New York cop on vacation in America's West who is drawn into a female sheriff's investigation of a mysterious series of cattle killings. Oh my God, I have seen this movie. This is the cow. This is the cow stealing movie. Oh man.
What?
Yes, they think aliens are stealing cows and leaving their dead carcasses on the ground. And then they find out that it's the government like stealing them with helicopters and something. I totally watched this in Paraguay in Spanish on Paraguayan TV.
Wow, this was Jo Beth Williams was in this.
Robert
Same
Urich,
year.
Paul Dooley, Hoyt Axton.
Wow.
Peter Coyote.
Hoyt Axton.
Yeah.
Nope. Never heard of it.
Holy cow.
Not even a thing. So to speak.
Wow. I need to watch this one again in English.
Put this on the list.
Yeah. That's really funny. But it's interesting. The Road Warrior did get nominated for Best International Film, but not Best Science Fiction Film.
How did it do with the box office?
As you said, the production was supervised by Paramount's television unit instead of the theatrical division. And with a relatively new director at the helm, the team behind Wrath of Khan put the meager $12 million budget, or $29.8 million in today's dollars, to good use. I think we talked about last week Star Trek. What did it balloon to? Like 46 million, something like that. So this is a huge drop in budget. As a side note, they did actually start with an $8.5 million budget, but the studio was so happy after seeing the first couple weeks of dailies that they did give Nicholas Meyer and his team a little more money. The movie was released June 4th, 1982, the same day as Poltergeist, Hanky Panky with Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner, and Disney's Bambi reissue. It was number 1 at the box office when it opened, but unfortunately, it was knocked down to number 2 just the following week when E.T. opened. And as we've talked about on the show before, it crushed everything else. Khan went on to make $78.9 million domestically and $16.9 million internationally for a total gross of $95.8 million, or $238.5 million in today's dollars. This gave the movie an adjusted profit per finished minute of $1.9 million and ensured that it wouldn't be long before audiences got to see what happened to Spock on the Genesis planet.
That sort of leads us as we wrap up here to what this film represents as a part of the original series cast franchise, right? This is, insofar as the motion picture was the first movie, this is the first part of a trilogy,
right?
a narrative trilogy, including The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. And when you look at them as that, well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. They are fairly different in tone as we go through the three.
Right.
And this one, for me, certainly represents my favorite. It is closest to my style of science fiction filmmaking that I really am attracted to and love. And it was great to go back and re-rank it and just realize how much I would rather watch this than so many other movies.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What'd you learn? What'd you learn after watching this again?
There's so much more detail in this story than I remember. Just lots of little bits and pieces. And I really did enjoy going back to Space Seed and watching that first, because it just kind of helped me set up this world a little more and reminded me of all of those things. So when Khan has that conversation, when Chekhov and Terrell first discover him, I was able to kind of put all that into a better context. But I just think that there was just so much excitement built into this film that it's really great. There are questions that I have that I would say, does it make it any worse of a film? I don't think so. I mean, questions like, okay, when Chekhov and Terrell first realize that it's that they're on the Botany Bay and this is where Khan is, why don't they just say, hey, beam us up and just get beamed out real quick instead of running all over the planet again? Questions like that. That's like, there's probably some logic that they could have done. But I think what works so well in a film like this is the script is effective. It moves quickly. And if those are the sorts of questions that pop up years after having watched this countless times, I think they did a really good job with it. So it goes to show that you don't need a gigantic budget to make something really effective, as long as you have storytellers and a team behind them who know how to kind of push it into place and make it happen.
It's interesting, your comment, the kinds of things like, why didn't they just say beam me up? Those are the kinds of things that I think a real Star Wars or Star Trek aficionado behind the script would have fixed, because it's so easy to fix, and there are so many examples of fixing it in the original series that it's ridiculous that they didn't fix it. There are excuses that one line would have fixed that, and it would make it so you don't think about it again. And I think that's the difference that we have, that we get in Nick Meyer and Harve Bennett, who were still learning the ropes. And I think that once they do learn the ropes, they get progressively better at their work together, and we'll come back around to some of that conversation later.
Because Nicholas Meyer will certainly talk about in this series again, and Harve Meyer, I mean, he was on all the way through this. He and Nicholas, they got to.
He and Nicholas hooked up.
Harve Bennett, he was on through all the original cast films, right?
He's around for there is a they refer
5.
to it as the Harve Bennett generation.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Like he's part of an epoch of Star Trek management. He's the Kevin Feige of early Star Trek. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I think we should probably get right to the business of ranking, don't you think?
I think we should. Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see our stack ranking. But if you swipe over in your show notes, you'll find this film. Just tap on Flickchart and you'll jump right to the Flickchart page. You can add it to your list. Where do we start?
Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, or Hot Fuzz. Khan, baby.
Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Khan, baby, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek II, or Seven Samurai.
Star Trek II.
Yes, Star Trek II.
That is an amusing comparison.
It is. Star Trek, this will be an interesting one. Star Trek II or Aliens? These are so close on my chart, but Aliens takes it for me.
I think we're going to have to go to the mat.
Yeah. It's a tough one. This is a tough one.
It really, really is, Andy. See, these didn't come up when I had to rank them when I did it on my personal ranking. This would have stymied me. It's quite possible I would have just left the browser tab open and walked away.
Just said, I'm not letting you win today, Flickchart.
Yeah, no, that's not how I'd like to play Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
All right, let's do it then. 1, 2, 3. Scissors. Paper. Rock. Paper.
Okay. It is what it
It
is.
is what it is. Star Trek 2 or The Shining?
Oh, Star Trek 2.
Star Trek 2, please. Star Trek 2 or The Innocents? More Star Trek 2, please.
Star Trek 2, yeah.
Star Trek 2 or The Fisher King? That hasn't popped up in a while.
Star Trek 2.
Yeah, I'm going to say Star Trek 2. Star Trek 2 or 101 Dalmatians? Those are some cute
Star Trek
puppies.
2. Yeah,
Cute
they're
puppies,
cute
Pete.
puppies. Star Trek 2.
Yes.
Give me the SETI eels.
Yeah, Star Trek 2 for me. Star Trek 2 or Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
Ooh.
I gotta do Star Trek. Star Trek 2, please.
Yeah, Star Trek 2.
Well, Pete, that puts Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, at number 40 on our chart out of 311 movies.
Man, 40, that felt like it was climbing much higher than that much more quickly.
It's because of Aliens. It got smacked down by the Queen.
Okay, so what's this do on your personal flick chart?
I actually did a re-rank on that one after rewatching it, and it jumped up a few hundred spots. It landed at number 49 out of 3809.
No, it landed at number 17 out of 996.
I think that means it's technically higher on my chart than it is on your chart.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it is.
Because I'm at a 3,800.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But regardless, we're both,
interesting.
it's in like
we're both clearly fans.
Yeah, we're both big fans of this one.
There is still a Star Trek movie above it.
Which I'm really curious about. I can't wait to talk about The Final Frontier. So,
yep, that's the one. Absolutely, hands down. Generations, you got it. The whole thing.
So now, but I forgot to ask earlier. So there's a director's cut of this out there now. Did you watch that? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I can't. That's the iTunes version that you can get. It's through iTunes Extras. It plays the director's cut,
which I guess is only like 3 extra minutes or something with Scotty's nephew, right?
And I couldn't tell you anymore because it's the only version that I've watched. I can't tell you where those start and end. Huh. But there's nothing in there that I recall makes a massive amount of difference, apart from the fact that it makes me want to watch Escape from Witch Mountain.
Yeah, right.
Again.
So I was looking at him like, why do I recognize that kid? Who's he? What's he in? And then he dies. Who is this kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he's the director's cut kid. And the Escape from Witch Mountain kid. Yeah.
Yep. That's it. I'm assuming for you that this is a big old 5-star and a heart.
This is absolutely 5 and heart.
5 and a heart for me too.
Hardcore.
Letterboxd.com/the next reel. You should definitely friend us up over there. If you're on the Letterboxd, if you keep your diary, you should check it out. There you go. All right. Where do we go from here?
Well, we're going to be just taking a little trip back to Genesis next week with Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, as we find out, did Spock die? Is he still alive? What's going on this strange planet?
Oh, look, there's a cantina here, too. This has been a lot of fun, Andy. I am really enjoying Star Trekking with you. We should have done this a long time ago.
Yes, indeed. And here we are.
That's right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and attention downloading this and listening to this conversation. You know, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. Amazon giveth, Andy,
as Amazon always doeth.
I'm gonna go first.
Take it away.
I'm gonna take it away because mine's a little bit longer.
I think it
than
is.
Yours.
Yes.
I'm pretty excited about this one. This is the 2-star because there aren't very many 1-stars. I went with a 2-star because of the pithy title. Are you ready?
I can't wait.
The Wrath of Khan, no Khan do.
Whoa. That's like if a title with a colon has another colon.
That's exactly right. I saw this film when it was released and loved it. I wanted to like it when I watched it again through Amazon Prime. The film has not aged well. Spoilers ahead. The characters are less substantial than in the late 1960 series. Mostly the characters are cameos of themselves. Cameos? Of them? I don't think you know what cameo means. The plot is potentially interesting. Khan attempts revenge on Kirk, but the plot pacing is glacially slow. The side plot of Kirk's ex-wife and his son is a caricature of a good relationship gone bad. The special effects are tawdry. Tawdry.
Why?
So much of the entire film is, hey guys, look what we can do. Yeah? Should you watch it? Yes. Watch the entire film corpus and don't skip the best film in the series, Galaxy Quest.
True fans.
Buried alive.
Well, I've got a 1-star, Pete, by Kevin Bringman, who starts it off by saying, William Shatner is as good as he ever has been. I give it all the stars. William Shatner is as good as he ever has been. Leonard Nimoy, Walter Koenig, and Scooty, and Mr. Sulu, and a newcomer Christy Alley are extremely great.
It's Scooty. I give it all the stars, and so I will give it 1.
This is why I love Amazon reviews.
Oh, God, that's so good. So good. Thank you, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in Season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. 2 of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy. And East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.